welcome to episode 3 of Meet the Toberts. We're happy and excited to be with you today, talking about how to figure out personal finance in the middle of a busy medical career, right? And our podcast is about thriving in and out of medicine, no matter where you are in your training or career. I'm Sue Tobert. I'm a recently retired pediatric cardiologist and mom and spouse to this dude.
I'm Daren Tobert, and I am a sleep medicine physician, soon to retire, and I did years of pulmonary and critical care medicine.
And together we have over 80 years of experience doing medicine. So let's dive into the current reality of medical training. And, it's about money and finance today. So going to give you some statistics. As of September 2023, the average medical school graduate had $250,000 worth of total student loan debt. This is excluding pre-medical, undergrad, other educational debt. So this is 4 times the average of just a regular non-medical, non-healthcare college graduate. And if we look at the last 15 years, this is a 156% increase in average debt.
Yeah, and that's an average too. Remember, about a quarter of med school graduates have their med school tuition paid either through grants and special programs, military funding, or parents paying for it. So that 250 average, there's some people out there with $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 of medical school debt.
It's overwhelming, just purely overwhelming. So you may remember that we are originally from Alberta. We did our medical training there. And what is an interesting comparison is that in the same year, 2023, the average medical student debt among Canadian graduates was about $20,000. What would that be today in today's dollars?
Well, that is today's dollars.
Oh, that is today's dollars. Yeah, that is. Yeah. I'm thinking back to our debt when we graduated, 30 years ago?
Yeah, we graduated in 1989. And so back then, Canada just has a more generous support for their medical schools from the government. And so we were married halfway through med school. Yeah. So for the last 2 years of med school, we were living completely on borrowed money. And so we graduated with about $100K of debt when we were done medical school. And so we took full advantage of the excellent medical training in Canada and got really good training for a reasonable price.
Yeah. So we feel very fortunate about our personal experience, and it's just kind of heartbreaking what kind of the next generation of trainees is going through. And we have a daughter in med school who is living on student loans. So we've done a deep dive into this whole area. And just before we kind of get into an interview style conversation with Daren, I want to set the stage, just the awareness around stress of money matters hanging over you. Now more than ever, we experience this phenomenon of lifestyle inflation as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what is lifestyle inflation and how does it affect people?
Yeah, so there's a couple of high risk times for people going through medical training and into practice. Firstly, as a med student, when you are, if you are living on debt, then you've really got to be frugal and try to minimize that debt burden as much as possible. And it gets difficult because you're tired, overwhelmed from training, you're just exhausted, and you want to do that retail therapy. But it really, really makes sense to live as low as you possibly can while you're borrowing money. The smaller the nut you graduate with, the much easier it'll be to get rid of down the line. So that's a real high risk time. And then the other major high risk time, when you go into residency and fellowship, you're earning enough to pay your debt or pay your interest, at least on the debt while it defers through residency. Mm-hmm. But, and you kind of, when you're a resident, you don't kind of have the idea that you need to really inflate your lifestyle. But a very high risk time is the first couple, 3-4 years of medical practice. Okay, your salary from fellowship to attendinghood quadruples or more. And it's kind of bizarre, athletes will run into this when they hit the pros, they get the enormous checks. And most physicians run into this too. So it's an extremely high risk time. If you've got a lot of debt in that scenario, you're very at risk of undergoing an immediate lifestyle inflation. You go to the bank with your new salary and they're willing to basically say, how much house do you want? We'll bankroll it all. They'll give you a doctor loan where you actually don't have to put anything down, and you'll sign up for even more debt there. So White Coat Investor has, kind of a tagline, and what he's known for is live like a resident. So your first few years in medical practice, you should continue your resident lifestyle, which is kind of middle America average kind of income lifestyle. Continue that and chunk all of the new salary, or nearly all, against your debt, and knock that student loan debt out. And of course, there's other ways of addressing it. Some people will work in underserved areas. There's student loan forgiveness programs, and there are counselors out there that will help you manage your student loans, and big shout out to them too. You can find those folks linked in the show notes as well. And we've done that with our daughter. We had a kind of preparatory consult, just even to understand what type of loans there are and how to take them out, how to maximize the government offerings first, because they will pay back the easiest with the lowest interest rates. And, when do we consolidate our loans? When do we refinance our loans? So definitely avail yourself of that type of help, even if you're just in the process of taking out debt.
So that's a hard pill to swallow, right? You've postponed gratification for years. You come out with this massive debt load. You're entering practice already with the stress of debt. Like, undeniably, that hangs over people and can contribute to some kind of pre-burnout type symptoms, even maybe anxiety, maybe even some physical symptoms. Certainly, financial wars amongst spouses and significant others can occur. So again, we're about being proactive, right? Be aware of this, be aware that you've postponed gratification. You want to keep up with the Joneses, and our thoughts are do whatever it takes to continue to live like a resident and really, really engage in your personal finance journey. And we're not telling you this to make you kind of feel bad or anything. This is such a common dilemma among medical graduates. Like, just be kind to yourself around this. This is really hard. And there's this kind of built-in setup for challenge. So develop your strategy now, right?
Yep.
And go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, get comfortable with the idea of living at an average American income. Live on an average American's income, and then the lifestyle inflation can come later. Knock out those student loans ASAP. They will be an anchor around your neck. I meet patients all the time who are, going on to Social Security and going on to Medicare, age 62, age 65, who still have student loans. I mean, it's just insane. You're not going to be able to build wealth. It's basically like trying to run forward with an anchor tied to your waist. So by all means, you've got to address your debt early in life and get it knocked out.
Yeah. So I appreciate a little short phrase you just used, which is about building wealth. That's how we went into our medical training and practices. That was one of our goals. How can we build wealth and set a legacy for, even at that point in time, whatever future family we might have, because that was before kids, right? And so we went on this kind of personal finance budget journey, right? Like, a budget is a great tool to tell you how to manage your money and where to put it and how to spend it, et cetera. But it's really up to you to hold yourself accountable around what you are spending. So blasting your budget out of the sky, I mean, we've done that multiple times, isn't helpful in the end. But remember, you're a high achiever. You're probably one of the more motivated, organized, personally accountable people on the universe doing medical training. And for some reason, we kind of get so into that narrow medical training lane, and time and energy is consumed like crazy. We kind of forget there's other things in life, right? So being proactive in this personal finance planning space is really important. which,
So
yeah.
I would just say, people hate the word budget. Don't use the word budget if you don't like the word budget. Use the word plan. Okay, you're just making a spending plan. You're making a plan for your money. Dave Ramsey would say, every dollar has a purpose. Every dollar has a name. So you need to make a plan. Now, the degree of detail, we're going to talk about that, right? So the degree of detail is variable, and you can probably do it with a pretty minimalist approach. You don't have to plan, like to the penny, but it is certainly helpful to plan a few things. Like you have to plan out your debt reduction and just kind of multiply it out and see how long it'll take you to get rid of your debt. You have to plan to save for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
That's not optional. You've got to make a plan in that regard. So some people just do that. They plan their debt reduction, they plan their savings, and then the rest of it they just spend, and they don't worry about categorizing into housing and food and restaurants and stuff like that. But they at least plan their saving. If you make sure you're hitting those marks, you're going to be okay with a minimalist plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. I probably am more of a minimalist planner. I viewed you as kind of the personal finance guru in our family. So Dave Ramsey would describe him as the nerd. I'm the free spirit. Like, just tell me what my allowance is and I'll go from there, kind of thing. What do we have to spend? But over the years, you've done a really, really deep dive into this space, and I recognize your expertise there, Daren, and how you've helped people over the years. Just tell us a bit about your journey into personal finance. Like, what prompted you to even care about it?
Yeah, so it probably came up for me first in residency, where we started to get actually paid for what we do. And all of a sudden we had income. We never as a couple had income before. And so we were each receiving a residence salary, and we had these debts from medical school left over. That was right around the time that we were immigrating and moving and so on. So, when I first realized that we had money left over, now it's like, okay, what do I do about saving and investing? Really hadn't done much saving before that. So I picked up a really old book. I don't even know if it's in print anymore, by Daren Tobert, and it was called The Only Investment Guide You'll Ever Need. You might actually be able to find it. I'm not sure. We'll link it in the show notes if it's available. But that really piqued my interest, because I kind of wrapped my head around the power of compound interest at that point, and just seeing, the understanding things like the most valuable thing that you have in investing is your time. So the earlier you start, the better. And so how to do investing, and then all the deep dive into the different types of accounts to use, how to avoid taxation along the way, how to maximize your family's wealth, the importance of tracking your net worth and keeping a track on that number. So we, to this day, will track our net worth, and we're always trying to make that number go up. Doesn't matter if the debt number increases a little bit if you're buying a valuable asset that pays in the future. So net worth is the thing to track, and you always want to have that moving upwards. And then over time, it will move upwards faster and faster, and that's the power of compounding. Yeah.
So you said something that jumped out at me about you have time that is to your advantage when you're investing and saving. And think about how that contrasts with medical practice, right? You give a ton of your time, you're giving all day long, and that is never recaptured. And that sometimes that time exhaustion and energy depletion is what leads to burnout, right? But flip side is around what you have for income and your ability to build wealth is totally benefiting from time. And so there's some sort of autonomy you can recapture there in that moment. So just be aware of that. We early on did some pretty rigid tracking of our numbers. And I know that's kind of relaxed over the years. From a free spirit standpoint, that was sometimes hard to conform to. We have budget meetings. I show up to those. How much time do you actually get of my brain during those times?
Oh, I think we probably have about 6-7 minutes, and then your eyes start to glaze over. So I've had to learn how to keep the detail to myself for the most part. just hit the high points, and then we can cooperate on finances. The importance of cooperation is absolutely huge. You've got to be on the same page with your partner.
Yeah.
There's no way around that. I mean, finances is one of the most common causes of divorce, for sure. So, one of the things that you must clarify with your partner before marriage or before long-term commitments is you got to be on the same page with regard to finances and what your long-term goals are and how you're going to achieve those. So,
yeah, totally agree. And we hold each other accountable, right? Like we kind of have, like, if you get to this amount of wanting to spend, you need to kind of talk about it. And so it's just not like free for all out there. Okay.
So what you mean by that is like you could even just agree on an amount above which you will commit to just sharing that with the other person before you go and buy something. So when you're taking on debt, that might be $50. It's like, you might commit to each other and say, I'm not doing more than $50 without talking about it. And then as you get into residency, it might be $200.
Right.
And as you get into attendinghood, it might be $1,000. Some kind of number where the other person would go, ooh, that's kind of the number where you want to talk about it first. So that's important. For singles, lack of accountability can be a major problem too. So I would say for singles, having an accountability partner, a trusted friend who's good at finances, or a parent possibly, or an uncle or aunt, or somebody who you can just bounce things off of from a financial standpoint is really good to have. And you don't have to share every detail of what you've bought and so on, but just a general high level view of your financial plan. Having someone to hold you accountable is important. Accountability is huge.
Yeah.
We've learned.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that might sound cheesy. Like we have friends who are like, what do you mean you got to talk to your husband about, spending this $500 on whatever? And I'm like, that's just how we flow. Like that's the teamwork. And remember, we've talked about building your team. Well, sometimes your best accountability partner is your significant other or that closest friend. And accountability is huge. So you hinted at this, like the minimalist approach. What about those people who don't want to balance their checkbook? Like any advice out there for that?
Yeah, well, I think the bottom line is you don't really have to. I think the key things with a budget are, you've got to hit a long-term savings goal. You've got to eventually have enough money to retire. Physicians used to get, defined benefit pensions where you work in a certain place long enough, and then they just basically give you an amount every month until you die. That's going away. I mean, we have some friends who do have that as a retirement option, but look carefully before you sign up for such a program, because some of them are forced to work to age 65 before they're allowed to retire, or they don't get their full pension.
That's the golden handcuffs for some academic institutions.
Right. For some places that have a pension like that, take a very careful look at the rules and regs before you sign up for such a thing. But yeah, if you're like most physicians, we're just W-2 employees. We have access to a 401k. But basically, if you save nothing for retirement, then you will retire on nothing and have Social Security. So you have to budget for that category. A good rule of thumb is 20%. You should be putting about 20% of your gross income into retirement, and you'll be fine with that. So that's kind of a minimalist budget. And then you can go full Dave Ramsey and give every dollar a name every month. Now, Dave, we had a phase where we went through Dave Ramsey. I picked up his book, Total Money Makeover, probably 20 plus years ago. And just about read it in one sitting in the Barnes and Noble. It just absolutely fascinated me. It was something completely different in personal finance than I've ever heard before. And Dave is fantastic at helping people who've been overburdened by debt. They get into real trouble in a variety of ways. He's got an excellent podcast and radio show, and Dave does debt counseling and debt relief and debt assistance very, very well. Listen to Dave for sure as you're working through your debt. Later on, I'm not a huge fan of Dave with regard to investing, and he's been heavily criticized in that area. But for the basics of personal finance, for digging out from a negative net worth, turning into a positive net worth, Dave is awesome. So I highly endorse Dave Ramsey for the younger folks who are burdened by debt and just wanting to know how to basically approach personal finance.
I would say one of the highlights for me was our journey into leading Dave Ramsey classes for about 5 years. And during that time, so the repetition for me was important. Seeing the Dave uh, videos, right? Like over and over and over again, helped stuff sink in for the free spirit. And seeing 175 people graduate from those classes over the years just really hit home. Like there is something important about what Dave's message is. And I recall one time, like a year after we finished teaching classes and leading classes, we ordered pizza and the doorbell rings and the pizza delivery guy was a former graduate from the FPU Financial Peace University classes that we had led. And this was this individual's second job, almost debt free, incredibly overjoyed about delivering pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's where the personal connection comes in.
Mm-hmm.
One of the nurses I worked with took Financial Peace University, and we had a party the day she was debt free. Now she's retired. There can be huge blessings and joy that come from even watching your others in your life succeed in debt management.
Mm-hmm.
Any like short list of good takeaways from Dave Ramsey that you'd advise?
Well, yeah, Dave has the baby steps, and they're simple, super simple to learn. They're the absolute basics of personal finance and how to manage your money. So I'm not going to go through them step by step because that's Dave's stuff. So you should access DaveRamsey.com and find his stuff, and we will certainly link that. Another huge influence early in our careers and in my personal finance journey was The Millionaire Next Door. And this is a book by Tom Stanley and another author way back in the 90s. Huge influence on me, just basically studying what an actual millionaire looks like. TV and media give you one impression of a millionaire. It's typically somebody driving in a very expensive car, on a luxury vacation, sipping champagne. And that's not what millionaires are in America. The millionaires actually live next door to you. And they're typically, B students. They will sometimes be tradesmen. They're people who start a business, work hard all their lives, invest and save properly. And these are who the millionaires are. They're not flashy. They drive middle of the road cars. They will often buy cars used. They don't lease. There's just a variety of things that Stanley goes through in his Millionaire Next Door book that had a huge impression on me. There's the whole phenomenon of in Texas, they call it big hat, no cattle, right? So somebody who's flashy, who's out there financially showing off his stuff, typically that's tied to a huge bag load of debt. And those people actually have a very low net worth when you dig into their history. So work on your net worth, build up your net worth, and be, sneaky rich. Don't look the part, just be the part. And that's where your enormous satisfaction will come from.
Mm-hmm. So a couple things come to mind. One is that as you build your net worth, then generally as a healer, someone in healthcare, that sort of thing, you also are tending to be very generous. Like that just kind of is how the package is. And that's how philanthropy happens. Legacy planning for your family in the future, and then philanthropic efforts. So it just blossoms. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, that's like years down the road. So with all this studying and that you did and this deep dive into personal finance, what were some of the first like saving benefits and wins that we saw?
Yeah. So just, initially getting rid of the student loans. I mean, that's an enormous relief of burden and stress. So just getting rid of student loans was huge. I would say when we were ready to upgrade our home, Having a down payment, being able to save up a down payment is huge. They will give you a doctor loan where you only put down 1% or less or zero. But it's much better to have the equity, right from the start. So getting a down payment for a house is huge, and being able to plan for having a kid without worrying about what it's going to cost, knowing that there's a margin in your spending plan so that you'll be able to buy a crib and, stuff like that. So, I think those are some early wins. And then later, just, seeing your net worth grow and projecting it out using various tools to look at where you're going to be by this year in your life and that year in your life, and just seeing, okay, well, we might be able to retire in our 40s, maybe our 50s. So I get a lot of enjoyment and happiness from that.
Yeah. So Daren mentioned a little bit about having children, and I can think of several friends who were challenged with infertility, and moving through that evaluation and planning is hugely expensive. I know a surgeon who froze eggs in advance of, what her busy career is going to be. That there's an expense there. Like, there's different ways to plan for families and growing a family, adoption as well. And so, those are things that, depending on where your heart leans, you're going to want to investigate. And there's a price tag, right? There's always a price tag. And so factoring all that into your plan, I just want to be kind of inclusive in what we're sharing here. Okay, so it's not all wonderful, right? What are some financial challenges, mistakes that we've encountered over the years? I don't know, they're mistakes even. Maybe it's just challenges with good learning. I don't know.
They're mistakes. They're mistakes.
Okay.
So we made a few significant mistakes that hurt us along the way. Obviously, we learned from them, and to share that with you, we actually did build a fairly big house right out of residency. We were, both subspecialists, so we'd been in post-medical school training for 7 years by the time we were ready to actually start attending hood. So we built a big house. Now, by that time, because our student loans were relatively small, we had them paid off by the end of residency. So we didn't have that debt, but we did take on a large house debt. It worked out okay because, with a house, the appreciation is such that you can, at least get out of the house for close to what you paid for it, even with building. And we were in that house for 6 years. But that would be a mistake. I think we should have taken a more middle-class home. We could have paid that off more quickly and just built more and more equity. So that I'd call a mistake. I was very into investing back in the late 90s. And those of you who are old enough will realize that was a time when the NASDAQ and the tech stocks were going insane. Physicians actually clustered in the doctor's lounge around CNBC, and we would watch like between patients or after rounds. And so I invested in some tech stocks at that time, even on margin. So that was the huge mistake, was borrowing money to buy investments. Don't do that. I've tried it a couple of times in my life, and the stress when things start to go down is enormous. So, you don't want to have to sell your investments at a low price and take a huge loss in order to pay debt back. So never borrow to invest would be one of my hard and fast rules.
So, I want to pause here for a minute, because we had conversation about that, right? And I think you and I spoke, you explained the process to me. I understood it as best as I could as a free spirit. I wasn't as engaged as I could have been. And so, what could have been different there in how we communicated or held each other accountable around that, do you think?
Yeah, I think, there've been a couple of times in life where I just didn't listen to you. And that's straight up the way it was. I thought I knew better. And, that's on me. I didn't do well. So I think the more life's gone on, the more I've trusted your thoughts and evaluation of a situation. You've got a good intuition for that. And so listen to your partner would be another strong lesson that I've had to learn painfully over the years.
Yeah. Well, Thank you, honey. I appreciate that. It goes the same for me. We learn from each other, right?
Mhm.
And we just move forward from there, not holding any blame.
Yeah, well, it is what it is
Yeah,
at this point.
right.
We recovered, obviously, and we're doing fine now. But
Yeah.
I think another of the mistakes I made was around budgeting specifically. Um, I would always want to maximize the savings, and they talk about creating a level of scarcity, like a little bit of a cash is tight kind of a mindset in a family is not a bad thing if you're taking the other money and using it for savings. I probably overdid that. Not probably, I did overdo that. So there were times where I would, harp on Sue for spending and the girls. Um, that was overdone. We still spent a lot though. And so even though I would harp about it, ultimately I'd usually go along with what they wanted. So we ended up living, I think, through our middle age years, a pretty luxurious lifestyle.
Mhm.
But I was always kind of pulling the other way and saying, we need to rein it in. We can't afford this. We shouldn't do this. And I overdid that. And I say it created a little bit of tension that we've had to work through.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. There was some tension around that. And at the same time, it made us really thoughtful about our spending.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it as it might have just been the message, like we don't have enough money to buy that, versus let's sit down and talk about it, right? There was maybe more opportunity for conversation. And remember that statistic, two people working, spouses working, only have 25 minutes of quality time together in a week. So that time energy constraint with two busy medical practices contributed to how we maybe should have communicated better.
Yep.
So
Mm-hmm.
interesting observation.
Yeah. So doing it differently in the future, what I would tell you is if you're the budget person in your relationship, really focus on just making sure you're hitting your savings goal. And if you're hitting your savings goal, adding more to savings might not be as important as meeting your spouse's need and your family's needs for just some luxuries along the way. This is okay. I think that you can make sure you're getting good value for your money and not just frittering it away, but try to loosen the purse strings a bit, I would say.
Well, let's bring this circle of trust in for a landing. What are your top three takeaways you'd want people to kind of think on today?
So I guess I can think of three right away. Number one, knock out your debt early. However you do that, get rid of that debt, get back to zero net worth. Many of you will have a negative net worth for several years during med school, residency, and early attendinghood. So knock out your debt as early as possible. Number two, start saving, making sure you're hitting a savings goal. That can be your whole budget, pretty much. Just make sure you're chunking money away. And then number three is the importance of working together with your partner or having an accountability partner to just check you and make sure that what you're doing is reasonable and sane. So I think those are my three big things.
Yeah. So I would add for my three big things that this whole growing your financial planning awareness, not just budgeting, but financial planning awareness, is a necessary chore, even for free spirits. So, I like things that are creative and spontaneous. That's not what this is. That's why he gets only 7 minutes of my time at the budget meeting. But I'm choosing to connect, and that's really important. So it's a chore, but it's necessary. I agree. Start working the plan early, and I am grateful for how you led us on that journey. I'm not sure I would have been that way. And then again, working with your significant other, but I'm going to pull the family in there. Is that if you have children, or as maybe your future kids are growing up, well, we did something called the Bank of Dad, but get them involved in financial.
That's maybe another episode.
That might be another episode. So get them involved in thinking about all of these matters really early.
Yeah.
Because when they launch from the nest, if they know about budgeting and they're entering into student loan debt, et cetera, they're going to be like 500 miles ahead of the next college student. So invite the whole family onto that same page about money.
Mm-hmm.
So next podcast, we're at choice here. So we're just going to leave kind of a cliffhanger. We can talk about the Bank of Dad, or we can talk more about just kind of doing a family, like how to do that in the middle of medicine. So we'll think on that. But it's been delightful to connect with you. We have a number of resources that'll be listed on the Influent site about kind of debt and mental health, the white coat investor we mentioned, the student loan advice dude, Andrew Paulson. We have stuff on Dave Ramsey. We'll list the Millionaire Next Door. Tons of good resources, and take care.
Thanks.